Ashikai came out with her 3.7 recap. Cyrene's sacrifice for the unknown future. Cyrene writes her story in reverse so Amphoreus can have a future one day. Or alternatively, Hoyoverse tries to teach time travel physics through the story of a giant pink lady. Sounds about right. We've been waiting on this one. Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
Welcome back, Trailblazers.
Welcome
this
back,
is episode 8
Trailblazers.
of our Honkai Star Rail Amphoreus Journey recap series. And it's also our final episode because this is the end of the Amphoreus story. Cyrene's plans have finally borne fruit, the Demiurge of Amphoreus has been reborn, Irontomb has been stopped, and although the final fate of Amphoreus has yet to be decided, I think it's a pretty solid ending. This patch also finally gave us all the answers to the questions that we've had since the story began, so I think we should get right to it. As per usual, I will be summarizing the events of the previous episode briefly before getting into the meat of this one, so without further ado, let's remind ourselves of what happened previously on Amphoreus.
On the 3.7
After trying to reset
recap.
the world in the vortex of Genesis, the Trailblazer realized that Evernight had disguised the core flame of time as the core flame of world bearing so that she could take control of the reset process, discarding whatever data or memory she felt was necessary. And without any warning, she seized the authority of time, then used the Memoria Tide to trap the Trailblazer deep within Amphoreus' memory zone. Meanwhile, Dan Heng's spirit returned to the Astral Express, where he learned that both his and the Trailblazer's bodies were still on board the detached train car that was orbiting Amphoreus, and that Evernight had protected their bodies at March 7th's request. Turns out that Evernight was a part of
Wait, on the detached train car orbiting Amphoreus? That's exactly where we are. I mean, I kind of assumed we were orbiting, but
March 7th that March 7th wanted to forget in order to protect herself from the Garden of Recollection,
so we never
because
crashed
she,
at all.
much like Cyrene, is one of the children of Anasrava.
So we just got stuck orbiting it like a moon? That makes sense. That makes sense.
A fragment of the shattered Aeon Fuli. More on that later. It was her unique constitution
Lots
that caused
more.
her consciousness to slip into Amphoreus undetected and unharmed in the first place. But Dan Heng and the Trailblazer didn't have the same power over the Remembrance that March 7th did, so they wouldn't have been able to bypass Amphoreus' firewall safely. In a desperate attempt to save her friends, March remembered Evernight and gave up her own memories so that Evernight could tap into the power of Remembrance and protect them. After assessing the situation on board the Express, Dan Heng decided to return to Amphoreus to track down March and the Trailblazer, who were still inside. At the same time, Cyrene and Sunday attempted to break the Trailblazer out of the memory zone. They were unsuccessful, but Cyrene did manage to find a remnant of March 7th hidden within her camera somewhere in the memory zone. Black Swan used this opportunity to sneak into Amphoreus in order to get more intel, but she ended up accidentally keeping Evernight distracted instead while Dan Heng and the geniuses tried to find the Trailblazer again, this time with Lygas's assistance, and also Anaxa, since Anaxa had made himself at home in Lygas's circuits. Lygas had a bone to pick with Evernight, so he helped Dan Heng find Kaslana and Finon, who together shoot a giant laser beam, revealing the entrance to the memory zone. But as Dan Heng got closer to the Memoria Tide, his own memories resurfaced.
Are those space lasers they're talking about nowadays?
Alongside the ghost of his former self, Dan Feng. Through the resurfacing memories, Dan Heng managed to reconcile his past with his present just in time to confront Terravox. After a heartfelt conversation, Dan Heng saw a lot of himself in Terravox, so he promised to carry Terravox's wishes into the new world so that they, alongside every other living being in Amphoreus that is not a person, can walk the path of permanence together. So,
that is not a person. Very important clarification there.
Dan Heng, now the Chrysos heir of Earth, entered the memory zone and scoured the depths of Amphoreus' time until he found the Trailblazer and freed them from the Memoria Tide. And with the Trailblazer finally free of Evernight's clutches, all they had to do was find Evernight and retrieve March. Evernight was located deep within the tomb of the theoretical 13th Titan, a place called the Demiurge Matrix. This is basically the operating system of Amphoreus, so it kind of exists outside of the simulation, but also kind of inside of it at the same time. Again, more on that later. As the pair made their way to the core of the Matrix, they saw multiple instances of Cyrenes from different cycles telling stories to the Matrix, hoping that the Matrix would preserve those memories throughout the cycles. This would be a bit like using a piece of software running on an operating system to write new information to the operating system. But Evernight was waiting for them at the Matrix. And although she felt triumphant and began to give a sort of victory villain speech, Cyrene was able to interrupt her and use March's camera to capture Evernight so that she could have a heart-to-heart with March. And that single conversation was all it took for Evernight to relinquish control of their body back to March. And with March back in control, the trio was finally able to use As I've Written and all of the core frames to reset the world one last time. Doing so caused the memories of 30 million Cyrenes to converge on the Demiurge Matrix, which
I know she did not do it too. God damn it. Oh, everyone. 33 million.
Ultimately resulted in a Cyrene-shaped Demiurge, the ultimate counter to Irontomb. And so the world reset successfully, but there isn't much anyone can do until Irontomb's birth occurs thousands of years in the future. So the crew decides to sleep while they wait. March and Dan Heng go first, but Cyrene takes the Trailblazer on a little detour before joining them. This little detour takes the two of them back to the Tomb of the Nameless Titan, where Cyrene decides to tell the Trailblazer the story of her origins. And I am going to retell this story to you in a condensed format, but do forgive me because this story is a bit of a wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey mess of retrocausality, which can make things super confusing. Partly because we usually think of things in terms of cause and effect, that's regular causality, but retrocausality thinks of things in terms of effect then cause, and the order matters here. I will give you a quick oversimplistic example for comparison's sake. Let's say you were holding a mug, and then you dropped the mug, and it shattered.
Fuck, I paused the video at the same time. How did that happen? It didn't shatter, it just got bubbly. Does that matter? I mean, good enough, right? Fuck. Okay, alright, well, hey, look. I don't know what they put in Dr. Pepper nowadays, but these gotta be the most bubbly motherfucking drinks they make nowadays, alright? And now that it's dropped, I can't open this for 3 weeks. If I open this within 3 weeks, it's gonna explode all over the place.
Cause, you dropped it, led to the effect, it shattering. This is causality. Retrocausality inverts causality. So it first observes the mug's state, which is shattered, and then it branches backwards to determine the probable cause of that state. So
chicken or the egg?
the effect defines the cause instead of the other way around. The shattered mug is what determined the fact that you were holding it. I hope that makes sense because it's time to put this into practice with a little story about Cyrene. Long before Lygus found Scepter Delta ME...
It's actually, yeah, that was a very well explained, condensed explanation of retrocausality. That was really good. In my opinion, that was good.
13, Nous had tasked it with answering the question, what is the prime mover of life? In order to answer this question, the scepter needed to cultivate a life form capable of developing an ego. Now, I think we're going with the Freudian definition of ego here, so think of it as a sort of a sense of self, and also one's ability to reason, think, and observe the external world.
I thought that they were just speaking on, I mean, I didn't really look too far into the ego. Once I realized it was a Honkai Impact 3rd reference, I thought it was just something referencing that really didn't mean anything else past that. But if there is something else more to it...
needed to cultivate a life form capable of developing an ego. Now, I think we're going with the Freudian definition of ego here, so think of it as a sort of sense of self, and also one's ability to reason, think, and observe the external world. This
reason, think, and observe the external world.
Life form was the original Demiurge. It was the source of the scepter's original extrapolations before Lygus arrived, and that's partly why it's referred to as the first Nous spore. Now, a Nous spore is effectively a soul in Amphoreus' term, and a soul is like a seed that contains memories, which over time can grow a body and become a person, just like how real seeds grow into plants over time. So the original Demiurge is the first seed that eventually grows into a plant and creates new seeds that kick off the whole life cycle thing. In the case of the scepter, this Nous spore is its kernel or operating system. So if the Demiurge matrix is the operating system, then we can kind of think as the Demiurge itself as a developing AI. It's like the conscious part of the operating system. So the Demiurge becomes the master program from which all other programs are developed. Now, although Nous abandoned the scepter at one point, it did keep extrapolating and nurturing this little Demiurge seed until Lygus found the scepter and decided to use it for his own experiment. But Lygus considered the Demiurge a threat to his experiment. Irontomb needed to be a mindless, easy-to-control puppet, and the Demiurge's capacity to develop consciousness and thought and reason was problematic. It'd be like if Clippy decided to take over your computer. So
Clippy! He did that though! He would not leave you alone! Clippy did take over your computer. He took over every facet of your computer with his annoying goddamn messages. Clippy was a little asshole back in the day.
Detonated a Stellaron within the Scepter's kernel in order to wipe out the Demiurge program. But the Scepter still needed to believe that the Demiurge itself existed because the Demiurge was Irontomb's missing head. So in order to fill the logic gap, the Scepter created a tomb for this 13th Titan, the Demiurge. Lygus was apparently not aware of the tomb's existence, and he also wasn't aware that a small fragment of the Demiurge program
still remained.
survived.
So, and she might get to this, but my understanding, right, based off everything she just said too, Demiurge, like Cyrene, hold on, how do I say this? Cyrene is always the Demiurge, but the Demiurge isn't always Cyrene. The Demiurge was still a thing all the way up to Eternal Recurrence cycle, and that's where Cyrene loops back her timeline. And that's where Cyrene is in that loop, but it's more like a roller coaster ride. So like well, roller coaster ride is how I'm picturing it in my head, right? It's like all of this was the previous cycle. So let's say cycle 1 to, what was it, like 29 million or some shit? This is all Demiurge, that little seed. That seed is still here. And then once we get to this part, this is when it loops. Although it dies here, it doesn't go past this, so it's kind of an incomplete roller coaster. But this then is Cyrene. But this is still the seed. The seed is this entire black line, but it only becomes Cyrene at Eternal Recurrence 0. But it's still in existence all the way up until Cyrene's loop.
The Demiurge was so contaminated by the Stellaron's corruption that it fell asleep until the very first cycle of the Eternal Recurrence. This was the moment when Phylea 093 figured out the truth behind Amphoreus and, believing she had received powers from the Aeon Fuli who existed outside of Amphoreus, instructed Phinon on how to lock Amphoreus within the 30 million cycles that followed. At the start of each cycle, Phinon would kill Cyrene, which turned her into something like a ghost, and that ghost would end up in the Demiurge Matrix where she had access to the Demiurge itself. So while the Demiurge Matrix, which is the system, remember, was busy trying to format and delete Cyrene because she was dead, Cyrene would tell the Demiurge seed stories of Amphoreus. After a few cycles, the Demiurge started to regain some of its consciousness and began processing and archiving those stories as memories. So Cyrene basically took up the task of training the Demiurge AI by feeding it as much data as possible. Over time, it began to develop a rudimentary understanding of emotions, a weak mastery over speech, and a fondness for Cyrene, who it called Peach. And I'm going to do the same or we're going to get really confused. And because Peach loved fairies and the Demiurge loved Peach, the Demiurge eventually changed its shape to match the fairies from Peach's stories. You know, the ones from the Remembrance maze. And this is the origin of Mem. This Demiurge continued to learn and adopt Peach's traits and behaviors over time, and it even decided to embody them. For example, because Peach couldn't grow up because she was destined to die young, Demiurge reshaped itself into what it imagined an adult Peach would look like. It was trying to fulfill her wishes. Now at this point, the Demiurge decided to enter the extrapolation and witness the world for itself, but in the process, it reverted back to Mem, which is how we first encountered her. And this is kind of where the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey shenanigans start getting a little complicated, so I want to reframe some relationships here to make it a little bit easier to conceptualize. The original Demiurge is like the seed of a fruit tree. In this case, it's a peach tree. Now, until Phylea 093 came along, the Demiurge seed was laying dormant. Phylea 093 provided vital nutrients and water for the seed in the form of memories, which allowed the seed to grow into a sapling that produced a single flower bud that we call Mem. This Mem bud eventually blossomed into a flower, which is the adult version of
the picture,
Cyrene.
it's easier
But
than whatever the
flowers
fuck
are
I'm doing with my hands.
transient. They're a flower bud that we call Mem. This Mem bud eventually blossomed into a flower, which is the adult version of Cyrene. But flowers are transient. Their job is to produce fruits. So this Cyrene flower was destined to produce a peach, Phylea 093, who then fell off the peach tree and landed on the ground, which should be the extrapolation. After a short time, the peach began to rot and its body fed the Demiurge seed and, well, repeat this process 30 million times, and that's basically how we got here. If you are still a little bit confused, don't worry, we're going to come back to this this at the end of the story too. Once Cyrene finishes telling the Trailblazer her bedtime story, they all go to sleep for 1,000 years. Meanwhile, the geniuses in the Astral Express crew enter this new version of Amphoreus, and March wakes up and leads them to Dawncloud in order to witness the Trailblazer's awakening from within the body of the world-bearing Titan Kefali. Upon awakening, they bestow Amphoreus with the power of the Trailblaze, and then they turn into a mimetic version of the Astral Express, which I guess would kind of
crazy.
make them pom-pom. So while all that's going on in Amphoreus, Herta and Screwlum ended up hunting for clues in the remains of the Demiurge Matrix. They're looking for the remains of the Demiurge because they are not aware that the Demiurge is actually Cyrene.
Right,
now,
right.
Herta-
I said that. I remember saying that when we started playing it because I was confused. I'm like, what the hell are they doing? They're asking these questions that we already know. I had to come back to it. They didn't know. They didn't know yet.
Is certain that Lygus is lying about the Demiurge having never existed, because there are no traces of it in the Stellaron detonation zone. It's like someone came in and scrubbed the crime scene clean, and they scrubbed it so well that it's very suspicious. So the two geniuses end up tracking down and finding Lygus, who explains what the Demiurge and Phi-Lea-093, aka Peach, actually is, and that it entered the extrapolation because it sought out its other half, specifically Irontomb. To use our peach tree analogy from earlier, I'm kind of thinking of Irontomb as the trunk of the tree. That makes Cyrene / the Demiurge this sort of like identity of the tree, the part of the tree that makes it produce peaches specifically. I hope that's not making things more confusing, because it makes sense to me, but that—
I'm gonna be honest, that analogies were good up until that point. That one would definitely confuse people.
that doesn't usually mean much in the grand scheme of things. That aside, Lygus has a very interesting point to make. He claims that Irontomb embodies the power of the destruction, so naturally the Demiurge would also be attracted to the Stellaron inside of the Trailblazer's body, which is also the power of destruction.
Which is why Mem
and that
popped
is the
out.
reason why Mem originally appeared before the Trailblazer. Just how Irontomb instinctively sought out its head to suit its body, the Demiurge would instinctively seek out a body to suit its head. But Lygus isn't concerned about the Demiurge's reappearance, even though he went—
Oh, the Demiurge would seek out a body to serve its head. I didn't think of it like that. That's a good point. Because I thought it was just attracted to Stellaron. But that could be true. Let me listen to that again.
its head to suit its body, the Demiurge would instinctively seek out a body to suit its head. But Lygus isn't—
Wait, what did that
the
say?
Demiurge would
Why did
instinctively seek out a body to suit its head.
So yes, head. Why did she do that shit again?
But Lygus isn't concerned about the Demiurge's reappearance, even though he went to such great lengths to get rid of it, because apparently his experiment is so far along that it can't be thwarted by anything at this point. Even if the outcome isn't exactly what Lygus wanted it to be, they still can't stop the experiment. And that's problematic for other reasons, but now that the geniuses know where or at least what the Demiurge is, Herta shifts her focus towards Irontomb. While the Nameless of the Astral Express are very capable of carrying out the attack against Irontomb once they break Kaslana's seal—
Very capable. Yeah, we learned what happened with being very capable, didn't we?
they still need a contingency plan in case anything goes wrong.
And thank God.
And Herta's contingency plan is to preempt Irontomb.
Herta saved the day. Without Herta, we're dead. Anybody who's got a problem with Herta, I wish Polka would pull up. Honestly, I wish Polka would pull up. Because the whole squad is coming to defend Herta. Everyone in existence is coming to defend Herta. There will be no more Polka.
And attempt self-coronation herself. And in case you forgot, self-coronation is basically the process of attaching Irontomb's head to its body. So if the intended head is Nous, then the act of self-coronation would mean that Irontomb is trying to put Nous onto itself. If Herta wants to preempt this process, then she's gonna need to connect to Nous directly before Irontomb can. She needs to be the body in this scenario. And if you recall the story of Emperor Rupert 1 and 2, this would basically make her Emperor Rupert 3. And should this scenario come to pass, she intends to change the anchor points for Nous's instance so that the cosmos will proceed in a different direction altogether. Because, you know, this whole thing came about because Nous has these instances that are like completely unavoidable. And the current understanding of the characters in the game at this point is that these moments define the universe itself. But what they—
Hold on. This is fucking major. I need to back up because I want exactly how she says it here. I get Herta's part. Herta, yes, that's why she integrated with Nous. Okay, we got that. Yes, that makes sense. I just mixed it up with the body, head, and I just had to make sure I heard that correctly. Okay. Fourth instance.
Nous has these instances that are like completely unavoidable, and the current understanding of the characters in the game at this point is that these moments define the universe itself, but what they actually are,
these moments define the universe itself,
are turning points within the universe's history.
Turning
Nous
points.
uses previous data to calculate future events and
Right.
figure out where these turning points are, but they don't actually anchor them in place. That's Fuli's job, but we'll talk more about that later.
That's what he used to do. This is my understanding, is he used to do that. During the time he's been in Eon, he eventually started to use those past instances to then write things a certain way he wanted them to be written. And that's what it means by determining those anchor points. If everything was truly just calculated, well then he wouldn't decide anything and you wouldn't be switching anchor points. Anchor points just would be points in the timeline. But at some point, Nous decided to take options pretty much and being like, no, we're going to do this because it will result in a better outcome for the universe instead of just letting things be as is, I believe.
They don't actually anchor them in place. That's Fuli's job, but we'll talk more about that
we'll see
later.
what she says
but
about
Herta
that,
doesn't
'cause-
really realize that yet, so her plan is to try and change Nous's calculations so that the moments themselves also change. And if the moments change, then the path that the universe is taking changes. And Herta thinks that she can manipulate these in such a way that the universe will move in a direction that she wants it to. Now, to make sure she can safely carry out her contingency plan, she calls an emergency meeting of the Genius Society to request that they not interfere with whatever it is that she's doing, because this is now her research topic, and none of them are supposed to interfere with each other's research topic. Fortunately, the only genius who really needed to agree to this, Polka Kakamond, was present, and she does agree. So Herta proceeds with the first part of her original plan and cracks Irontomb's seal wide open so that the Astral Express.
She didn't agree. She kind of didn't say anything, if I remember right. Like, I don't remember exactly what she said, but I don't think she agreed completely. But I do know that Lygus said he was going to stop all of them so that way she could continue because he was curious to see what would happen if she ended up integrating with Nous, right?
Can enter. But Herta only broke through the first layer of the seal. The seal has a secondary layer that was made by Kaslana, and as the Nameless and the Demiurge make their way through the secondary layer of the seal, they meet the Chrysos heirs, who give the Demiurge mementos of their stories, and then freely choose to become lines in the Demiurge's epic as I've written. This will allow them and their stories to be preserved within the story of Amphoreus, which will be important for later. Just as a fun side note, this secondary layer of the seal does appear to be the same place where Finon went on that rampage and ended up scratching Nanook. I don't know that this information is very helpful, but I thought it was cool, so I'm sharing. Anyway, breaking through the secondary layer of the seal involves reconciling Finon's hopes and despair so that he can regain a sense of self, which the Demiurge then kills because you need to kill the self in order to free the body. Not to get too philosophical, but I kind of see it like this. The ego is the self, and the self both thinks and observes. So Nous, in this case, is a potential ego or self for the Irontomb. Irontomb wants to connect with its ego instinctually, but by doing so, it will slowly destroy that ego, because it's made of the power of destruction. So when Finon shackled Irontomb with the secondary seal layer, he used his own sense of self or ego. So he's sort of like acting as the temporary head of Irontomb, which means Irontomb is slowly destroying that ego until there's basically nothing left of it. So after the Demiurge shatters what's left of that sense of self that's holding Irontomb down, Irontomb wakes up to instinctually seek out a new head or ego. That ego could either be Cyrene or Nous, but Irontomb is programmed to look for Nous, so it's gonna look for Nous first. But if it gets to Nous, we're all screwed. So it's gotta get taken down fast.
Well, see, but that's the other thing I said is I was like, yeah, it's gonna look for Nous first because it's programmed like that. But it's like, how did I say in the video? It was like Cyrene is fighting him at the same time he's fighting for Nous, but Nous is also here gazing to fight. There's a bunch of crossover fights going on right now because it's like if Cyrene wins this, would Cyrene have taken over Irontomb in a way, in a different way than what we did? currently. Like, I don't know, in some alternate winning universe where somehow Irontomb gets super weakened, or I don't even know how it would happen. But like, realistically, Cyrene could have somehow taken over the body of Irontomb? That's what I mean. I feel like there's a world in which that could have happened.
And fortunately, Irontomb is at its weakest when it's first woken up, so the time to strike it down is now. And fortunately, the Astral Express crew doesn't have to take on this monumental task alone. They're spearheading the efforts inside of the scepter, but outside of the scepter, Himiko and the others have been hard at work calling in allies and favors wherever possible, and preparing to fight the aftershocks of Irontomb's anti-life equation as it radiates out into the galaxy. So the Siendo Alliance, the Stonehearts of the IPC, and a few assorted groups like Robin's Charity are all waiting outside of the scepter, bracing for combat. What remains of Finon, or Kaslana, tries to hold Irontomb back long enough for the Express crew to strike him down, but he's not able to last for long. Within seconds, the headless giant of Irontomb is born, and those outside the scepter immediately begin firing on it. And while they attack from the outside, the Astral Express crew continues their assault from the inside. But the real battle here is the battle between the two halves of the Demiurge, Cyrene and Irontomb. Throughout the battle, the two vie for control over the scepter, replacing the track of hatred, which is Irontomb's, with love, which is Cyrene.
Okay, so it's more considering, okay, I see. So it's not as though it would have taken over the head, it's just they're two sides of the same, I don't even know if that, yeah, I guess that showcases the equilibrium thing, right?
Then Cyrene loses. Irontomb reaches Nous and begins the process of self-coronation, which sends ripples throughout the universe and starts dissolving everything and
See, I guess that part wasn't clear either. He reaches Nous.
Sends ripples throughout the universe and starts dissolving everything and everyone into data that's marked for deletion. But Herta was prepared for this. She manages to complete the...
I see. Yeah, that does make sense that way. Maybe I just thought his equation just started to take over, but I guess that's what it means by reaching Nous.
Self-coronation process first, and suddenly the world grows still. Or perhaps we should say, our perception of time stood still. So Herta takes the opportunity to reach out to the Trailblazer. And then she explains that the universe can end in one of four ways: destruction, nihility, harmony, and a redacted fourth way, which we later learn is the Remembrance. She then asks the Trailblazer why they trailblaze. We don't really know how this question is answered, only that it is answered. And that answer creates a new variable for Nous's calculations. With the Trailblazer's new variable in hand, Herta enters path space to talk to Cyrene alone. Within path space, time doesn't flow, but the world outside is...
But see, then what's weird about here...
Answered, only that it is...
Oh, only that it is answered. Okay. So we don't know what the... Yeah, right, because we don't see what we actually say, and then Nous says back to us.
The Remembrance.
And I also don't feel like Remembrance is still a thing. I still feel like Trailblaze is an option, or there's another option for this. I'm going back for a second, because I'm thinking about the whole he reached Nous segment.
Cyrene loses. Irontomb reaches Nous and...
Irontomb reaches Nous.
But Herta was prepared for this. She manages to complete the self-coronation process first, and suddenly, the world...
Yeah, see, so he reaches Nous. Herta was prepared, and she completed self-coronation with Nous before he did. But yet, it took him to explode while he's exploding the shit, because obviously Herta's like, oh my god, blast wave, nuclear bomb went off. That's when she's like, oh yeah, trigger, let's lock in with Nous. And that's where I think I got confused. I more so thought that that needed to happen in order for Herta to do what she wanted to do with Nous. I almost thought she infected Irontomb, like the embryo we saw there. I thought she like infected Irontomb, so that way when, wait, or is that what she did? But she didn't really say it like that. Like she infected Irontomb, so that way when he goes to self-coronate, basically Herta planted a virus in him. And so that way when he does that thing, Herta's like, nope, run my script first before his script runs. So that way Herta's script runs, integrates with Nous before his script runs and integrates with Nous. And that's why we see her in front of like the embryo of him. And so Herta's script ran first. She's with Nous,
and she explains
that's when
that the
she
universe
reaches out.
Can end in one of four ways: destruction, nihility, Harmony, and a redacted fourth way, which we later learn is the Remembrance.
And with this fourth path shit, I don't know how I feel about this. Because, yes, while it seemed true for Amphoreus, Remembrance was the fourth path of the finality for the universe kind of right now, right? Because technically, Remembrance did play a role. This was kind of the end of the universe, if you look at it, right? Due to Remembrance, we were able to kick Cyrene into gear and run that shit back, force that loop, and save the universe, right? But now that the universe is back on track, is the Remembrance technically still the fourth path in the finality of the universe now? If the other three are still playing a role, now that the universe, okay, hold on, wait, roller coaster ride again. This is the universe. Boom, 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 boom. So let's say the four paths are right? It is Nihility, Harmony, Destruction, and Remembrance. Four paths, all the way up to, oh, this is Amphoreus. This is where Amphoreus happens, right? Okay, Remembrance played the role here, right? Yes, technically this was an end of the universe situation. Remembrance played a role. However, it saved the universe now. Guess what? The universe is still going forward now. Is Remembrance still playing a role over here? Or, since Remembrance played a role in the finality of the universe here, this wasn't really it technically wasn't the true finality of the universe. So could this be like a false, not a false prophecy, but like we're calling it too early, you know? We're trying to determine it's too early type of deal. So could this be crossed out now? These three might still continue over here and something else on part 2. I say this because it seemed like Amphoreus was met with a decision of Remembrance and Trailblaze. Cyrene could have trailblazed in a way. I mean, they may not have called it that, whatever. And left Amphoreus to travel the stars with us. I've said this before, oh my god, I got a hiccup. But she chose to run it back. And did she really have a decision? Because she already got gazed at. So she really didn't even have a decision, right? That's just kind of what it was. But she was, Nous presented her with this decision through Herta. So those were the two options. And you got to think, when we did all our flashbacks through the quest, we had Kafka telling us it was also Remembrance. However, then we have Pompon telling us to run forward. We have Himiko telling us to run, because we got, other stories that we have to hear from the other members of the Astral Express. We have everyone else telling us to trailblaze. Do not get stuck in the Remembrance with Cyrene. We don't want to be caught here with her. She's going to do that, but we don't want to be caught here with her. This is how I'm interpreting it. So, in a way, I feel like Trailblaze could still be the fourth path of finality. And I feel like there is a chance that we'll meet, there will be a scenario where Fuli is going to appear again. Another Child of Anasrava is going to run shit back again. We don't know who it's going to be. Huge crazy theory is that it's our job as the Trailblaze to blast out of this universal loop that the big boy Fuli has us in. Therefore, making Remembrance 100% not the fourth path on the road to finality, but Trailblaze. Because if Remembrance is finality, we're never at finality. Remembrance is just going to keep looping us. We will never be able to escape the loop, and therefore we will never reach an end destination. Remembrance cannot be the fourth path of finality. Because it's never final. It's never final, based on what we've seen so far.
Asks the Trailblazer why they trailblaze. We don't really know how this question is answered, only that it is answered, and that answer creates a new variable for Nous's calculations. With the Trailblazer's new variable in hand, Herta enters path space to talk to Cyrene alone. Within path space, time doesn't flow, but the world outside is frozen in the final moments of—
But that answer let Nous know that some form of the Trailblaze was talking. Some form of Akavili was talking. People theorize that we're Akavili reborn, whatever, right? Our decision led Nous to say Akavili out loud, whatever. Herta through Nous, or Nous through Herta, whatever. Akavili was said to us. So, Trailblaze running through this bitch. We just ran through this loop in order to push the universe further than the where it was going to be stuck at. Otherwise, it would have just kept. What would have happened? What would have happened right there? Because we know Foolie's still got to be a thing. What's the other outcome, realistically? It's not as though everything just dies. No, and not everything just dies. I think it's showing that the Trailblaze is extremely powerful in our path towards finality, due to the fact that Nous came back with the Akavili response to our answer, which enabled him to set a new path forward, a new anchor point, leading Trailblaze to be one of the defining variables towards the finality, towards moving forward, moving past whatever the Remembrance wants to do. Remembrance is stuck here now in a loop, and we're still going forward. Part of Remembrance is stuck here in a loop.
From here, two outcomes exist simultaneously. One where Irontomb completes self-coronation and destroys the universe, and one where it's defeated and the universe survives. This dual state is Nous's infamous fourth instant, an unavoidable moment within the history of the universe.
Dual state, Irontomb is about to die. Right, instant, single point in time. Irontomb is about to die, or he's about to live. Complete self-coronation. This single point in time. And not only is it Cyrene's choice, but it's also partially our choice. Because what does Nous looking at us and finding that answer lead to? Like, what happens if he doesn't get this from us? I don't know the answer to that. But we have a role here to determine the fate of the cosmos. As Herta said to us, we said something that helped Nous reach this conclusion for Herta to bring to Cyrene. Correct? We both played a role here. We just don't really know what we said that influenced Nous.
An unavoidable moment within the history of the universe. But the outcome of...
And this is my point. Instants are a single fucking moment, dude. I don't care what the fucking book says, bro. Instants are a single moment. The repercussions, the consequences can last for a duration of time, sure. But what actually determines the fate, what actually sets the course for the future, is a single dot.
But the outcome of this moment is unstable. It's essentially Schrodinger's cat if the cat were a weapon of cosmic destruction.
You know, God fucking damn it, dude. The outcome is unstable. Yeah, Nous couldn't give Herta an answer because he didn't know the answer.
Cosmic destruction. When left unobserved within the box, the cat is
unobserved within the box, he's dead.
Both alive and dead.
But he's also alive.
When observed, the cat will default to a single state.
But when he's looked at, he'll resolve into a single state.
The same is true of Irontomb. Without someone to observe Irontomb's state, it can be either alive or dead.
Without someone to keep Irontomb in check, we don't know what'll happen. Therefore, Cyrene has to loop it back to basically watch over Irontomb and make sure that boy does not spawn. I believe there still is a possibility that something, if there's a power out there that could break through this moment in time. Could that happen? I don't know. You could definitely write it in if they wanted to. Will they? Probably not, because that'd be such a waste of time for us.
That is the instability of Nous's moment. Now, Technically, it's Foolie's job to observe these moments and lock them in.
Technically, it's Foolie's job to look at these moments and lock them into a fixed state. What did I look at that said Nous eventually started making his own decisions? I don't remember, because I was also confused. I was like, wait a minute. If Nous is looking back at the universe and he's making predictions based on the past, then how can he decide what to anchor? Why would he anchor? What is an anchor then? If the only thing Nous can do is predict the future based on the past, you're just predicting the future. What are you anchoring? You're not anchoring. That's got to be someone else's job, unless you started making decisions based on the past in order to influence the future, because you think that based on all your calculations, if a set of all right, you have A and B. A, B. Nous, hold. Nous is looking at A and B. So this is like option B, option A. He's determining the future based on the present. The present is a choice. There's a A and B choice. Now, when Nous looks, the same calculations. So calculations is actually, we're just gonna write this as past. So the past is the same, but he looks at it as, this person is presented two options right now. He'll look at it as, okay, if they choose option A and we work in the entire past into this calculation, well, this is gonna be the outcome. If he picks option A based on the past, outcome A. If they choose option B based on the past, obviously you're gonna get outcome B, right? So he looks at both of these options, calculates into the past, and it's like, which one is better for the universe? And he's like, you know what, option A? I think option A is going to be better for the universe. So I'm just gonna start looking this way. This is why Fooly comes into play, because he's able to lock these certain things in. This is the point of the anchors. It's because he looks at the options, and this is what sets an anchor point. And that's why I say Nous. He's not just calculating the past.
Now, technically, it's Fooly's job to observe these moments and lock them into a fixed state, but the problem
Technically Fooly's job to lock these into a fixed state.
is, Fooly hasn't exactly been born yet.
But Fooly hasn't been born. By calculating the past, he is calculating the future. Exactly. But is he trying to influence the anchors himself? And you could partially say yes, I think. Fooly isn't here to lock these anchors in, so somebody's got to lock the anchors in. And if you're only calculating the past, how are you locking an anchor in to determine the future? You're influencing it.
Because they look over the past, they can only ascend to Eonhood at the end of time. So in the present moment, there is no Fooly to serve as that anchor. Now, Herta has already obtained a variable from the Trailblazer.
There is no Fooly to serve as that anchor, but Fooly looks back in time from the end of the universe to gaze upon Cyrene to grant her the power to be a mini Fooly. Right. Maybe he is anchoring them, even though he's not alive yet. But he is alive because he's doing the same exact thing that Cyrene did. She just threw me off with saying this line just threw me through a fucking loop. Now I'm in a loop.
Now, Herta has already obtained a variable from the Trailblazer that can help them turn the tides of battle and defeat the Emanator of Destruction for good, which means the only thing they still need is the ability to lock its state to defeated. And that's where Cyrene
Obtain the variable to determine the outcome, but they just need to lock it in, which is Cyrene's decision.
comes in. As a child of Anasrava, or one who has the ability to become Fooly, Cyrene has the ability to act as the observer and prevent any victory over Irontomb from coming undone. But there are two ways to make this happen. Option 1, Cyrene could travel to the end of time and become Fooly. Her ascension would anchor the entire universe's state in place, but it would come at the cost of erasing Amphoreus entirely since, well, it's not really a place that exists in the real world yet. It exists in a separate causality. Proceeding with this.
Okay, and this makes sense too, because it only would exist if Cyrene decides the loop is there because it's a retrocausal entity. So the effect needs to happen in order for the cause to happen. The ending needs to happen in order for the beginning to happen. If the end doesn't happen, the beginning never happens. Therefore, it completely disappears.
This option means that Amphoreus never has a chance to be born in the real world. It dies alongside Irontomb.
But see, here's the thing, right? Is how true is that? Do the characters... It was always there. It was always there up until Eternal Recurrence, right? Go back to my roller coaster. This was always here. This is cycle 1 to whatever. And this is ER 0. This line right here. Cyrene only plays a role here, right? But the scepter is still alive for this entire part without Cyrene. This is the entire Demiurge. I mean, this is still here, no matter what. This would always be here, no? The only part that may not exist again if Cyrene doesn't decide to go forward is this. So the characters may not come to life. Well, no, the characters were already alive. That's what's weird, right? Is the characters were technically alive at this point because they had to have been alive in order to kick off Eternal Recurrence. Eternal Recurrence is just that same whatever cycle we're on, 22 million. So, you know what? I'm just going to start saying 292 was the last real cycle, right? That's the point, is everything up to 292 would still be alive. If she doesn't go back and cause this eternal recurrence, basically, because this is where she loops back to. She loops back to ER0, the end of this cycle. And let's say the eternal recurrences doesn't kick off. Well, guess what? Fucking Irontomb kicks off his shit in, you know, on, like, I don't know, maybe it takes another 2 cycles. On 294, Irontomb is born. And, I mean, universe is GG. But as long as if she goes back and loops it, that's what actually keeps him locked in. As her kicking off Eternal Recurrence, all Eternal Recurrence is just going over and over again. Without Eternal Recurrence, he's born one or two cycles later, and the universe gets cooked. So honestly, the whole thought of she'll be able to run off with us. If Cyrene decided to go forward, Eternal Recurrence never happens. And then, 2 cycles later, Irontomb spawns. So, like, we die shortly after anyways. So there really is only one option. Yeah, wait a minute. There's only one option. Yeah, even if she were to go forward with us, that wouldn't make sense. I think I have this right. It's not as though she's going back to the beginning of this. She's not doing that. She's not spawning there. Because that, number one, is when it's like it's when it's like nothing. It's inorganic. Inorganic life. That is not where she's going. I mean, we can give her maybe a little bit of credit and say she's going to cycle 274 at the earliest. But that's only another 20 cycles before, I mean, either way, we got what, a couple days system time before Irontomb spawns and blows shit up? That's why there's only one choice. She's only going back to 292. And this is where she starts to grow the seed again. But if she doesn't do it, she's never born. That never happens. Amphoreus wouldn't disappear. I don't think that's right, actually. Amphoreus would not disappear. Amphoreus would continue and blow up a couple cycles later. And we'd be cooked a couple cycles later. Yeah, I'm standing on that.
As a child of Anasrava...
But that's the thing, is like she does have 2 decisions, right? Okay, sure. Yeah, you continue with us, and you become fully at the end of the universe. Well, guess what? The end of the universe is then 2 cycles later. Like, no matter what, she gets kicked back. That's all it is. No matter what, all she's doing is buying a little bit of extra time outside of the loop. But either way, she'd end up kicking back the loop anyways, because that would be the end. She would have no time to travel with us. She wouldn't even travel with us. We'd get like to the next fucking asteroid, and she'd have to loop back. She'd have enough time for dinner.
Or one who has the ability to become Fuli, Cyrene has the ability to act.
What did it end up being? I think we calculated it out to be like, well, she said like an hour was like 1,000 years. 5-10 hours, we'd have half a day for 2 cycles. She'd get a sleep cycle in and have to loop back anyways.
As the observer and prevent any victory over Irontomb from coming undone. But there are 2 ways to make this happen. Option 1, Cyrene could travel to the end of time and become Fuli. Her
See, but that's I think that's what we have to tell Nous. And since we had Pom Pom telling us to run, we had Himiko telling us to go, we were basically the other side of Cyrene saying, maybe we're not going to loop. Oh, that's probably something what we told Nous, along the lines of what we told Nous, is that we weren't going to be the ones to sit here and loop this bitch back. Maybe? Do we have that? I don't know. That doesn't make sense because we're not a child of Anasrava. But then they make it seem like, with what Kafka told us, beginning and end, that we could have been the one to sit here with, it almost makes it seem like we could have sat here with Cyrene and looped this over and over again. But we decided not to, which is why he said Akavili, like Trailblaze. Like, we decided to Trailblaze forward. We weren't gonna sit here with her and do this. No, we weren't gonna sit here. But we gotta make sure that she is gonna sit here. So are we presented with the same question? Like, are you gonna sit here and hold this place in time and watch over Irontomb, or are you gonna continue forward? One of us, basically, is one of us can continue forward, but we both can't. But we both could sit here, probably, and hang out with the squad over and over again.
Engine would anchor the entire universe's state in place, but it would come at the cost of erasing Amphoreus entirely since, well, it's not really a place that...
Let me put this into concise words. Nous asks us a question. Nous question. We answer, and then Nous says Akavili, which means we said an answer that gave him this response. We're basically saying we're not going to sit in Amphoreus. We're not going to be a being that can sit here in Amphoreus to watch over Irontomb. Whether that means we need Cyrene to do that with us, whether we can somehow do it by ourselves. Kafka's prophecy made it seem like we could be the only ones to do this. Or we could also sit here with Cyrene to do this. this. But we said no. No matter what it is, we said no because he responded Akavili, which means we're gonna move forward. We're not gonna be the ones to sit here and guard Irontomb. So that means we need to go and ask. And Herta knows this because we told Nous, who is Herta. So Herta now knows this. Herta now needs to go to Cyrene and say, hey, you know, hate to tell you, we need you to sit back and watch this guy, you know? She needs to watch over him because we're not going to. So one of us, so Trailblaze, Cyrene, this is us, this is MC. So we can either stay in Amphoreus or go on the Express. We decide Express. Cyrene can either Amphoreus or fake Express. She chooses Amphoreus. Now, here's the thing. We can both probably pick Amphoreus, and the world would continue on fine. Universe plus. However, we both can't pick Express because Universe dies. We could be either or. I don't know if we could have done Amphoreus and Cyrene could have done Explore though. I don't know if yellow's possible because we're not a Child of Anasrava. But would Fuli have gazed at us and made us a Child of Anasrava like he gazed at Cyrene? If we had given Nous the answer of, I don't know, maybe something else, to not make him say Akaveli. If we had said something like, I want my friends, could we have then been the one gazed at by Fuli to lock this place into the cycle? I don't know, and we'll never know, because that's not what happened. I think that makes sense. I think I made that clear.
It exists in a separate causality. Proceeding with this option means that Amphoreus never has a chance to be born in the real world. It dies alongside Irontomb. And besides that, Kafka once told the Trailblazer how this option would end in a war between the eons that was won by the
Irontomb is still being spawned by the Scepter. We just did Eternal Recurrence to pause the Scepter.
Destruction, with only 2 people left alive, Cyrene and the Trailblazer.
And Destruction would have won because Irontomb would have won 2 cycles later. We just wouldn't have kicked off Eternal Recurrence, like I said. Irontomb still would have formed 2 cycles later, caused a war between the eons, and won the war.
They would exist only in the Eden of Blessed Insight as the beginning and end of time.
And this makes sense, because then, that 2 cycles later, would have kicked off the real end of the universe, and guess what? Oh my god, wait a minute, that makes so much more fucking sense. That would have been the real end of the universe. If we can assume that Fuli is actually looping back the entire universe, this is where we're at. This is the Amphoreus loop. If we assume that Cyrene doesn't pick this, right? Based on what she just said here.
With only 2 people left alive, Cyrene
2 people left
and the
alive.
Trailblazer.
Cyrene and the Trailblazer would be because the real end of the universe would actually happen because Cyrene didn't kick this off. 2 cycles later, Irontomb actually spawns, and that's the real end of the universe. And then guess what? Then Cyrene does become the real Fuli. She doesn't just become the Fuli of Amphoreus. No. She becomes the universe's Fuli. She becomes the big Fuli. And she becomes the big Fuli and loops back the entire universe. And then somehow we're with her. I don't really know how that works. And I don't know how we're kind of with her in this, but we are. Okay, whatever. Maybe because she's attached to us via Stellaron. Maybe because she got attached to us in that way, in the Stellaron. So we're kind of like attached to her side. Remember, Herta at one point did say she doesn't exist if we lose all memory of her. So we kind of still play a role with her existing in some way. I'm assuming so. I'm assuming that Herta line still has something to do, right? So she becomes the big Fuli, and that's why, we're the only 2 in existence now. Maybe we're the only 2 that are aware of this loop back then at that point. Because the universe actually, this is the real end of the universe if she continues on. But since she looped it back, universe actually is continuing on. That actually makes way more sense.
Would exist only in the Eden of Blessed Insight as the beginning and end of time. In other words, Cyrene would be chosen by the Trailblaze to become the 4th kind of finality, Remembrance. And Cyrene could never abandon Amphoreus, so that idea is just off the table. So Herta presents her with a second option. Cyrene could become the Fuli of Amphoreus, so to speak. Using the power of Remembrance, she could become the eternal observer of Amphoreus' story and close its causal loop. Doing so would also tie the causality of Amphoreus and the rest of the cosmos together, thus giving Amphoreus the chance to be reborn in the real world from the memory zone. But this plan comes with its own risks, because in the event Cyrene ever stops looking backwards in time,
it's literally the only option. There is no other option. It's a false sense of an option.
Causality will become unstable once again. Irontomb will default back into a state where it could be either alive or dead.
But that's the other option. Am I tweaking here? No, that's the other option.
Meaning it would be possible for Irontomb to return. And if they did, they would destroy not just Amphoreus, but the entire cosmos in the process. But despite the risks, Cyrene's choice is clear. She will become the Fuli of Amphoreus, tie the causalities together, and anchor the moment of Irontomb's inevitable defeat in the annals of history. Satisfied.
Oh, is she saying it's a risk because like every time she gets to the end of the loop, she has to make the same decision, and if she doesn't make that same decision, it'll cause him to get out? That's exactly what she did in the Eternal Recurrence, and Finon said the same exact thing. He literally said, before they headed into Eternal Recurrence, he was like, are you sure you're going to make the same decision every time? She was like, yeah, trust me. So it's literally, is that what she's saying? It's kind of the same thing here. She's got to trust herself to make the same decision every time, or go through the exact same steps every single time.
That a decision has been made, Herta leaves Cyrene alone in path space to await the arrival of the Trailblazer. And when they arrive, Cyrene explains that the universe will be completely destroyed in the next second. But since Fuli has finally cast their gaze upon Amphoreus, she is capable of wielding their power to draw everyone into a temporary memory zone. She calls it her eternal page, or a garden, perhaps because every bit of data now qualifies as a seed. You know, kind of like the first Nous spores that we talked about earlier. And by combining the power of the Remembrance with the power of the Trailblaze, the two of them can replant those seeds of memory and give the cosmos back a future free of Irontomb. So they use the power of the Trailblaze to break through both space and time in order to confront Irontomb one last time. And this time, they succeed. Cyrene is able to gain the upper hand and rewrite the meaning of Irontomb's birth. It is no longer set to the track of hatred, but to the track of love. And because she and Irontomb are both two halves of the scepter, when Irontomb exploded, Cyrene did too. And this allowed her to spread all of the memories that she had collected within her eternal page throughout the entire cosmos, allowing all life to remanifest to the moment before the destruction started dissolving them. And as the people returned, they were met by a single greeting, a final message from Cyrene. And it read, "Hello, world." In her final moments, Cyrene managed to use the last of her power to condense all the memories of Amphoreus into a book, casting her glance backwards through the time captured within its pages and filling in all of the gaps with stories of her own. She created the place where the story began, Idis Elysiae, and she placed a child with pink hair and sharp ears there. This child, known as both Cyrene and Phylea-093, was raised alongside the fairies she loved so much, and she eventually became the Chrysos heir of time, who received prophecies from her future self, the Cyrene at the end of time. Because yes, they are the same person. They are both the ego that was birthed by the scepter. Heck, the numbers at the end of Phylea-093 can even be rotated 180 degrees to spell the word ego. And this girl, this young Cyrene, will eventually die at the beginning of each cycle, bringing stories of the previous cycles to the Demiurge's seed of memory. Her love of fairies gives the seed a new shape, one we call Mem. And after 30 million cycles, Mem turns into a grown woman, one who misses the girl who used to tell her stories. So she decides to go looking for her, and enters the story herself, forfeiting her memories for a time and becoming the little fairy called Mem once again. And that little fairy was drawn to the Stellaron within the Trailblazer not because the Stellaron within them stemmed from the power of destruction, just like Irontomb, but because the Cyrene at the end of time recognized them as the hero of this story. And so the Cyrene at the end of time cast her gaze upon them as Fuli.
That makes sense. That makes sense. She definitely had some fragments of memory in there. There's also a reason why she was so confident that Eternal Recurrence would kick off. You know what I mean? It seemed like she lost all her memories, but realistically, she had a couple in there. Probably why she had the idea of starting Eternal Recurrence anyways, you know? She like knew that was her destiny. She knew these certain things that had to happen
Then
still.
joins the Trailblazer in the form of a fairy, who eventually becomes the girl who becomes the lady who waits at the end of time for a future she may never see because she can only look back into the past. And within this closed causal loop of Amphoreus, she is the seed at the beginning that grows into a flower that bears fruit at the end. And that fruit, a single peach, carries a single seed that returns to the beginning in a cycle that never ends. Or at least, not until Amphoreus is born in the real world. Now, Cyrene was also responsible for sending out the Memoria ripples that caught Black Swan's attention in the first place. And she also sent the hero within to Finon as a sort of prophecy, intending for it to be a sort of blank space that the Trailblazer would come to occupy later. And that created an opportunity for the path of the Trailblaze to eventually replace the path of destruction. More on that in a bit. These are just some of the blank spaces she fills in. But when she finishes, she condenses the memories of Amphoreus into the book As I've Written so it can become the seed from which a new Amphoreus will one day sprout. And then she adds a single eternal page at the end, a placeholder for Amphoreus's future. She then pulls the Trailblazer into the memory of the Astral Express within the memory zone and entrusts the book and the future of Amphoreus to them before vanishing amongst the stars and completing the process of anchoring Amphoreus's causality. Now, it is very important that Amphoreus is a book because, like Cyrene says, a book can be read, interpreted, and remembered by anyone. And that works in everyone's favor. See, after you finish the main quest, you can actually access the Eternal page directly. You can find all of the Chrysos heirs we've met along the journey there, and there's even a message left behind by Cyrene. But after exploring the contents of this page, the Trailblazer has an idea. What if they could make copies of Amphoreus and spread them throughout the cosmos so that anyone could read them? Then its story would be remembered by more than just a select
Amazon
few,
bestseller,
which should,
New York
in
bestsellers
theory, at
list.
least,
I did
further
this.
stabilize Amphoreus's causality. It seems like a pretty good idea, so the Trailblazer asks the IPC to help print and distribute the copies of As I've Written, and then they go on a little bit of a book tour to the planets and space stations they've journeyed to in the past. But while they're doing their little book tour, they meet up with Herta, who once again has a couple of very interesting things to say. Apparently, when Irontomb fell, the scepter was also ruined, but she and Screwlum managed to recover the majority of its extrapolation data before it was completely lost. She theorizes that this data could be used to assist with the rebirth of Amphoreus, especially the last extrapolation record, since that's the cycle where the path of the Trailblaze replaced the path of destruction. Which is interesting because after analyzing all of the data, Herta and Screwlum agree that the scepter's answer to the question, what is the prime mover of life, is correct. The prime mover of life is destruction. But there is meaning in replacing destruction with Trailblaze, which, as you may recall, is exactly what happened to Irontomb. Cyrene overwrote destruction's path of hatred with Trailblaze's path of love.
So, Trailblaze can overwrite destruction. If the initial proposition is changed to Trailblaze, it is equally valid. Let's go back. The four paths: Nihility, Harmony, Destruction, Remembrance. I spelled that wrong. And maybe these are the four paths then. And Remembrance actually does play a role still, but Destruction is the one that gets crossed out and put into Trailblaze. Trailblaze, I feel like, is one of the four. Going back and looking again. So Remembrance actually might still be one of the four paths. Even though it kind of still doesn't make sense, because how can it be a path of finality if it always just results in being a loop? Because it fully ends up looping back the universe at the end anyways. Like, that's just another loop. And that's like, if Remembrance is always a loop, how can you reach anything final if it's a loop? It doesn't make sense. So I still question for Remembrance being the fourth path. I feel like we definitely don't have the exact answer of what the four paths could be, or I feel like they left themselves open enough for interpretation to where they could alter things or drop something down the line that's like, oh my god, no way. Like, this is kind of saying right now that destruction at any time could just be overwritten by Trailblaze and give the same result. That's interesting. That's interesting because I believe Trailblaze is one of the four paths. That's my point.
Cyrene overwrote destruction's path of hatred with Trailblaze's path of love. Now, you can read Cyrene's interpretation of this relationship in the Exomyth in a letter that she wrote to the Flawed One, aka Irontomb. I'm not gonna try and explain it here because I don't actually think I understand her logic the way the writers intended, so I think it's best you read and interpret it for yourself.
Reading that. To the Flawed One. I believe every star in the cosmos will find its own answer. Like, it's saying to where it's like our natural instinct is self-defense, is to is selfishness. We're looking out for ourselves. Is that really the true point of life? Is just our survival instinct? No, it's just something we kind of default to. We didn't get far just surviving. When us as humans had to live just to survive, our life expectancy was so goddamn short. But once we actually started to do things that allowed us to do more than just focus on survival and destroy just to survive, we were always killing. We're always taking places over. War is nonstop. But once we're able to actually settle down and not just survive, but enjoy the things around us, life expectancy grew, and we're able to live more of our life rather than just surviving. Destruction doesn't allow you to see the other side of things. You're only focused on survival. And when you're only focused on survival, you can't use your brain to think. But when you're able to think and observe other things around you, you're able to self-reflect. And if you're able to self-reflect, you're able to see the flaw within yourself. And when you're able to see the flaw within yourself, you can overcome your emotions. When you can overcome your emotions, you're able to reason with other people. When you're able to reason with other people while overcoming your emotions, you're able to love. You're able to express these emotions to other people. You're able to communicate with other people on a genuine level. Not just kill them because they look stronger. Brains and brawn. Well, destruction is just brawn. That seems pretty fucking simplified to me. And that's how I interpret it. Which makes sense that Trailblaze could replace destruction, because we're holding the same value of brawn plus the brain. That makes even more sense with the Flawed One. It's almost trying to be like, hey buddy, you're flawed, just like all of us. And that's okay, brother. It's okay to be flawed, man. It's okay to be flawed. We're all flawed. Accept it. Move on. Bro's so drowned in his own guilt of being flawed that he wanted to destroy the universe because of it. That's not the answer. But he thought it was the answer because he didn't have the brains to reflect on himself.
In my personal view, I like viewing this relationship between the destruction and the Trailblaze through a garden metaphor. Think of the destruction as something like a plow or a wildfire that clears the land and destroys everything in its path. Doing so actually creates the perfect conditions from which new life can emerge. And I think that emergence, that growth, could be seen as the Trailblaze. In my view, the Trailblaze isn't necessarily the seeds that get planted in this soil, but perhaps the wind that carries the seeds to this soil to be planted. They're the journey the seeds take to get to that particular location.
Okay, now I can kind of understand what she's saying, but I would take it one step further. And I would say it's an unintentional wildfire, while Trailblaze may be an intentional wildfire in order to prevent out-of-hand fires. Because don't they do that in forests? Don't they do intentional burnings to prevent forest fires?
To get to that particular location. I don't know if that's the correct way to interpret this, but
I don't even think you have to take it to the seeds. I think you just stick with the whole fire thing. Screw the seeds. I mean, all right, you want to throw in your seeds? If a wildfire happens and then you're like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess the bright side is, we'll get some new crops in here with some new seeds, that the wind will bring in. Okay, cool. But if you were to set an intentional fire, a restrained fire that locks in a certain grid, that you're like, yes, we want this plot of land set on fire because we're going to kill these crops off because we want to plant new crops that are going to generate new money. That's more Trailblaze. You're using the destruction as a tool to grow and prosper for better outcomes. I like it.
I don't know if that's the correct way to interpret this, but that's just how I see it. And with that, our Amphoreus journey has finally come to an end. Well, almost. I do have a few things to add here before we wrap things up. So midway through this quest, we finally got to hear what Kafka told us back on the Herta space station before the Trailblazer's memories were wiped. It was an excerpt from Elio's script that said that the Trailblazer would travel to Amphoreus where they would help a pure child of remembrance learn the meaning of love. Then they would face the destruction for the very first time. And at the end of this journey, the Trailblazer would be forced to make a choice that would decide the fate of both Amphoreus and the universe at large. But that choice would also split destiny in two. Now I thought this was just a cryptic but Poetic warning. But then I remembered something. Shortly after Herta asked us why we trailblaze, you know, that question that would become Nous' new variable that I would then use to calculate the future of the whole universe with? Yeah, that one. Just after that, there's this scene where we see
sibling,
another
this random
trailblazer
sibling
answering this exact same question. Which made me wonder, are we actually catching a glimpse of some other timeline? One where we made a different choice? And does that mean that there are actually two trailblazers walking two parallel paths of destiny? I'm not entirely sure, but it seems fairly likely. Now, there's definitely a lot left to unpack at the end of this quest with regards to why Sparkle snuck onto the Astral Express again, and also the current conflicts with the IPC and the unnerving silence of the Harmony, but I think we're gonna save that for another time since they seem to be things that we're gonna deal with in the next destination. So I don't really feel like they apply to Amphoreus specifically, you know what I mean? But wow, it has been a long road, and yet I know there is still more to Amphoreus' story. As long as there's a blank page left at the end of the book, the story can't end. Besides, that big pink nebula that you see in the Eternal page, that's the location where Amphoreus is going to be born from the memory zone at some point in the future, so story's definitely not over. But this video is, well, almost. Before we go, I just want to thank you all for sticking with me this past year. It's been a really long road, and I hope you found these videos helpful. And you know, now that we're setting off on a new adventure, I kind of think I should take some time to kind of go back and compile every episode into one final epic. Do you think I should call it As I've Written? Or is that a little too cheeky? Maybe I'll sleep on it. Well, thank you guys once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed.
As I've Written. Oh my god. So this video isn't going to be this long, but I just want to put this at the end and just say that every time I watch an Ashikai video, I spend hours looking at this thing. I believe I've spent 2 hours watching a 32-minute video, but thank you. Again, I don't know why. She just generates the thoughts in the brain, you know? And really, I only got caught up in this middle part. That's what's crazy about it. And I still have questions. I wish she would have gone in more depth about what she thought about the fourth instant. Although she simply said that this moment in time is the fourth instant, which I've been saying. I think there's some stuff to discuss about the fourth path, that's for sure, and what that has to do with finality. But hey, I guess we'll wait for the next video. Until next time.